like communities know far better what's gonna put their life on the line and what's not. Because we really don't know.
So for anyone that's just joined us, today's dialogue is the Planet Affairs Action Learning Communities in Dialogue on SOAS, Miseducation and Educational Affairs. And we just basically started by kind of actually trying to define what miseducation is more properly and how we see it, these institutions, intelligence, what role they're playing in continuing manganese crimes, but also what the practical steps are that we could be doing now, and how do we deal with responsibilities, how do we bring these things together. So this is part of PRALER, the Planet Affairs Action Learning Solution, and we're trying to, in doing these dialogues, is about equipping ourselves and wider processes in connection with communities to practically take up and continue the fight of generations past for not only planet repairs, but making education service our liberation struggle, service our communities. I mean, I kind of have a consensus right now that they're not doing that. So we are live from the School of Oriental and African Studies in London in the United Kingdom, just indoors from the Walter Rodney Freedom Square. And we would like to invite Sister Sumana to be able to share with us, with today's theme mostly being around honouring Jhalkaribai and all our Sheroes and Heroes freedom fighting legacies for the decolonisation of education. Robin, do I also need to record? No, okay. Then Sumana, would like to. I can introduce Sumana in the meantime. Sumana Nandi is an ex-SOAS student, so it's kind of like gone through this process herself. She's Bengali and is currently one of the coordinators of the Affinity Network of Asia of Extinction Rebellion, as well as Vidya Moksha Safari, which is a grassroots international solidarity women's action network, as well as also coordinator with Bija Gore, which is a Pan-Asian Center for Grassroots Community Activism in Asia, in India. So being able to share these perspectives, especially from someone who's actually kind of passed through these halls, had this conversation, because these aren't used conversations, and is now trying to like lock in on the ground, and has been doing that sort of work. So we're basically blessed to be able to hear from you, and we also greet others on the call, including Auntie Jendai from the African Connections Consortium, Auntie Alfia, Brother Kafwi, the PRALER liaison Knuckles up in Edinburgh. Sumana, are you unmuted? Are you there? Hello?
Yeah, all good?
Yes, yeah.
Great. So are we here today to discuss if everything is working in SOAS or not? Should we really discuss that, or should we really discuss what is the work of SOAS?
Interactive, everyone.
Yeah, I'm not really, it's not really a metaphorical question, but yes, if we discuss the question that what is the work of SOAS, so we'll be able to answer whether things are working at SOAS or not, So if we really see as to what the work of SOAS is, or from my limited understanding of what the work of SOAS is, or for that matter, any educational institution is to, feed the knowledge that we have into the community, back into the community of which it represents, or of which it is part of. So SOAS, as an educational institution, or as an institution of, Oriental and African studies have been using knowledge from the Oriental and African communities as knowledge from these communities into the world, which is of course the global north. Because, sorry, maybe if it's interfering, I'll just put off the video so that you can hear me clearly. Is that going to be okay?
Yeah, I think that might be better, yeah.
Yeah.
Just take mine off so we can try both.
Yeah. So yes, like I was saying, that the work that SOAS is supposed to do, it has not really been doing it, right? We all know that. We all know the kind of knowledge that SOAS has been using from our communities have been only going against our communities. It has used, traditional knowledge. It has used our own community wisdom, and has only interpreted and misinterpreted sometimes in a way which has benefited like the global north. It has not really benefited our communities. If this has benefited our communities, then our communities would have been not be misinterpreted, would not have been misunderstood, would not have been had the world wouldn't have a mis knowledge about our communities. For example, India has been known as a land of snake charmers, and like this exotic land of people and culture, apparently. But isn't that a distortion of what India is? Or is that not a distortion of what our communities are? We are more than just snake charmers, we are more than just exotic people. So we are more than our food and our culture. We are more than that. However, the institutions like SOAS has only made us an objects, merely as people who are associated with a particular things. For example, with India, the snake charmers; with Africa, it is like this the ideas that they have about cannibalism and the things that they associated, which are very negative in the image that they have portrayed us is in a very negative light. So the work which SOAS has done is only misinterpreted our communities, has only put our communities in a very negative light, which in turn has made some of us believe that our communities are inferior. It has made us to believe that we are inferior. It has made us to not respect our own traditional wisdom. It has made us to believe that our traditional wisdoms are not really worth it. It has made us to, disrespect our elders. It has made us to disrespect our own selves. And that is where the problem, or I would say the real challenge as to whether SOAS, whether things are working in SOAS or not, kind of, comes out. Are educational institutions supposed to make us feel better or worse, or make us feel worse? And SOAS has been successful in doing the latter. So, so here we are today to discuss the so the whole point of us coming together and discussing what we are today, let us also think of things that what are the importance or relevance of educational institutions, and how are educational institutions in our communities work, or what was the role of educational institutions in our communities, not in prehistorical times, but also which are relevant now. For example, I'll tell you from my experience, from my own ancient experience. uh, you know uh, like as it been mentioned, as I'm sure you people have heard of this proverb, that it takes a village to raise a child. So the whole raising of a child is to instill the values, instill the morals, and all of this comes from the traditional wisdom of the communities in whichever part of the world. And in Asia, there's this very, like, for example, I remember when I was a very young kid, we didn't have electricity connection throughout. So especially during the evening, uh, after it went dark, if there was a power failure, we used to sit under the terrace with, of course, a lot of stars, since there was not too much of pollution in my village. So we could see the stars then, unlike in Delhi skies these days. So, we had this a candle, and well, not so romantic at that point of time, but definitely sounds very romantic now. And we have my grandmothers, talking about their experiences. And it could be from anything, experiences in the family, experiences of how they spend their childhood. And that is how, the knowledge regarding traditional medicines used to come out. For example, if somebody would cough or somebody would sneeze, my grandmother would definitely be saying that you should take some turmeric, and you should take this particular medicinal plant, and that is going to be okay. So this is the knowledge. My grandmother definitely was not a doctor by a degree, but the knowledge about traditional medicine, or the knowledge about treating common cough, is a knowledge which many women used to have, and they still have in many parts of the world, without having a degree from, say, the School of Tropical Medicine and Hygiene. And it is completely okay to respect that knowledge, instead of trying to say that it is not very scientific, or it is not very modern in that sense. So this ideas of knowledge, these ideas of wisdom that are already present in our communities today, are to be respected, are to be valued, and especially by institutions, and that has to be also instilled by educational institutions like SOAS, to make itself work for its own sake, for the sake of the education institution, and to also mark its relevance in our communities today. It needs to respect our communities. It needs to be, respect our traditional knowledges and the knowledge systems that are present in our communities. So if SOAS is really interested to make itself work, and if it wants to make itself relevant and still become the global university, then at first it needs to go back, as the Sankofa bird goes back, to look into its past, which is for SOAS, it's quite a dark past, and there are a lot of skeletons in its closet, and those are the skeletons that SOAS needs to look into. SOAS needs to think that the purpose for which it was established, SOAS needs to revisit its own vision of teaching administrators to go into the colonies and keep on the system of imperialism and colonialism, because that was the reason why SOAS was set up in the first place. So the reason why educational institutions like SOAS and the other Oxbridge institutions were set up were to not have any relevance for our communities, but to serve their own colonial interests, and to keep up with its own elitist and uh, white supremacist policies. So SOAS these educational institutions, to become relevant, needs to get down from their high horses, needs to get back and see how the communities are represented within its own, course modules, within its own campus, within its own outreach programs, as to where the communities are, and how the voices of the communities from which SOAS apparently calls itself to be an expert in are heard or not. Where are the voices of the communities? Where are the people of Asia and Middle East and Africa talking about their knowledge systems, talking about their own expectations from SOAS? So the whole point of this discussion would be to also ask you as people who are part of the as people who are part of the SOAS family from now, and I hope that people who aim to be part of the SOAS community as well, to think whether our voices, whether our community interests are taken into account while we are at SOAS or while we are part of the SOAS family. Does it even make sense? Do we really? I mean, for example, when I went to SOAS, I never thought how my going to SOAS would affect my community or have any impact on my community. But do we really think of these questions before we become part of education institutions? Or do we even see education institutions as to, having an impact on who we are and who we are as a part of the community that we belong, and how it influences the identity that we have from our own communities? Do we? So, the whole journey of decolonialism or decolonization or decoloniality, all of this the answer of it is also in our own personal journey of consciousness. So while we, claim, to say that we all believe in decolonization, and, it's such a pretty world of post-colonialism, are we really conscious about the fact as to how we are also part of the whole coloniality, and how some of our own actions are impacting or influencing colonialism? And at that time, it is also that at the same time, it is at the cost of our own communities. It is at the cost of our own selves. It is our cost of our own identities. So once we kind of think all of these questions through, and we seek answers to it, and encourage others in SOAS and those of the SOAS family and beyond to answer these questions to our own selves, we will be able to answer the question if things are great in SOAS or not. So I'll leave you to think on this, and maybe for a minute or so, and maybe, let's discuss as to what your thoughts are, and we'll take this forward again. Right?
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you.
No, thank you, Sumana. Lots to hold and reflect on. Maybe like split the room in half. So like this after can like scoot and kind of like think about reflections, and same with this. Like, and I think what would be helpful is if we could also move it into like the practical things that people want to do, feel like our solutions to that question.
Yeah.
A little.
Yeah, I'm no comment.
Man, you stumped the room. So everyone's just.
Oh, yeah, me as well.
It doesn't feel.
A few minutes on. Briefly to others on the call. Meetings in Edinburgh.
Yeah, I don't know.
No, it's kind of nice.
I need to
Anyone has direct questions?
Something I was ready, like I was already, but it's interesting to read again because I never thought my being and I think it's also interesting that Sumana reiterated. I mean, like SOAS is basically capitalizing on the knowledge of the uni, including the industry, but and I feel like that's just like it's questioning. I think like I went to a different institution before that, and that's a question. And I think I know that SOAS is very problematic, like behind that. But do you think whatsoever there's a lot that like you see students of some SOAS is so even if I compare it to my previous institution, I'm actually like. It's not really SOAS. I was thinking, okay, but maybe my tutors are also the professors are also part of this. Figure out being like so just like us on the level being used by the institution, because I feel like SOAS by employing.
I think it's also interesting
from the global south.
SOAS
Again, like it's SOAS at the end of the day.
so like decolonizing SOAS is like
I don't know if that makes sense, but I was just thinking
academics of SOAS, but like how to like
I think like
it's the curriculum,
has been said.
which is always like good and like a necessary part of the equation, but like to really like decolonize a space like
You guys talk about it, but I'm just staying critical of my own
needs
perspective.
to be no tuition. Like tuition is colonial and like does actively colonize and like
I think it's interesting because I was thinking
and like you have people like could be like writing these articles like online that are like students from developing nations like shouldn't have to pay tuition fees. It's like
for me.
yeah, but like what are you doing? Yeah. What are you doing to address any of that?
Black, brown students, knows about the diversity, we're talking about decolonization, we're all the alternative development, current structures, everything.
Well, efforts
And like,
fucking
you know, okay, like, and anyone outside of SOAS is very much like, wow, like that's so alternative, that's so cool. And like people do see it like exactly like I think my problem is like
subject
like and like for like our community
in all the systems.
like something we say
They are very general
and when you see
out
it's a practical solution.
work for the
And I feel like one of the problems, like for me, is
everyone up.
go into every class coming out with like, I already knew.
For me, also very
Or like they just reaffirmed your belief.
I think that's generally like a critique of academia in a way as well.
kind of
If we can push it under your comment. No, but go on. I'm really.
And like I think I was just like,
what are you kind of into and what are you following?
I feel like
And I
they
think
pat you on the back
might
for
be
thinking
something
you're on the right side of
can
history.
be
And it's like, but actually like,
address
you going through this, you just being complacent.
students
They're still killing my people.
learning lessons, sitting in the library and
You never do
learning,
anything that's killing
taking meals in order to again
attend
go
history
somewhere in society.
surrounded
Senseless.
by people that say they're talking about decolonization.
And
And like I think for me it's like
purpose of
I don't know,
this
the other day I just feel like
is to get you on the job
it
market.
feels more sinister in a way because it's like
Okay, this is kind of very
it's like
Again.
this is the perfect, you know.
very small scale.
It's really not doing shit. So I don't know, like that's how I've been
Yeah.
just like,
Yeah.
and it's a difficult one to articulate. It's one of those ones like,
Yeah.
you know, when you're here and you know you're in the belly of the beast. You know
Yeah.
you have more privilege than people.
All right, great to see this dialogue really happening, and I'm really glad that we're all putting our minds together in this. One of the things that I would like to mention here, just by giving an example about how, academia or mainstream white superiority or white, academia in that sense, white studies as they are called sometimes, um, were able, as I said before, being able to make our distorted the history of us in global south. So one example I would like to start with, which is one of the reasons why we have, named today's program after Jhalkaribai. Jhalkaribai was a woman from the Dalit community in the central India's. She was a brave soldier, and she was one of the great administrators who was part of Rani Lakshmibai, who is considered as one of the major women freedom fighters of the British colonialism from India. So Jhalkaribai was one of the main key figures in the team of Rani Lakshmibai when she has been fighting the British colonialism tooth and nail. Not a lot of historical records have been available on Jhalkaribai, and there have been many other women, especially from marginalized communities, who have never been recorded in history, who have, like, history, there's no mention or of figures like Jhalkaribai in the anti-imperialist struggle of South Asia and many across the world. So, educational institutions like SOAS has the work to document, to document and go deep into our own histories of our communities that they claim to be experts in. So SOAS does not really talk about, Jhalkaribais. They do not talk about women from marginalized communities who have been part of the anti-imperialist struggles. They have not been able to talk about the marginalized voices who have been part of the anti-imperialist struggles and also have been, struggling anti-imperialism of caste and class and gender within our own communities as well, not just in terms of colonial, anti-colonial struggles, but also an anti-colonial struggle in the sense which has, led to the black skin, white masks, and has continued with the neo-colonial practices, which are still prevalent in the societies that we live in today. So today is the birthday of Jhalkaribai, a lady who has been successfully been able to defend the kingdom of Rani Lakshmibai from the British. And it has been recorded that Rani Lakshmibai was not fighting the British at some point of time. It was Jhalkaribai who was on a horse with a sword in her hand fighting the British army. And it is Jhalkaribai who was under a guise of a man, because in those days, women were not been fighting on horses very openly. So it was since Jhalkaribai was under disguise, and therefore, history has not really been able to identify, it seems. So, today let us talk about more of Jhalkaribais, there are so many other women. For example, Uda Devi is another woman from Asia who has been, another anti-imperialist, anti-colonial figures in the Indian independence struggle. But then there are so many other women figures. For example, my own grandmother, with my mother's mother, that is, she was also part of the anti-imperialist struggle by just, taking guns from one part of the city to the other part. So, that is also a very minuscule work, which might not be recognized in history, but she has been to take, to have that kind of courage to be able to supply arms from one place to the other, to evade the police, to be able to side with the anti-imperialist struggle is a lot of courage, and it is something to be recognized in history. So let us today talk about, our own grandmothers, our own, friends, our family, and so many other women that, we have in our own communities. For example, aunties and sisters, or even like friends of friends, and so many others who have been part of anti-colonial struggles. And let us come to recognize their struggles. Let us come to, come and let us talk about those women. Let us name them. Let us have pictures if available. And let us, help in recording history. Let us put our community history from our own perspectives back into, where it belongs. Let the whole world know our communities, because SOAS has been unable, SOAS and other education institutions have been unable to truly give a true picture of what our communities are, because it has been because it has failed in its work of being an expert in Oriental and African studies. So let us, take the work of representing our communities in a global university in the way that we should. So I'll share a link with you in a second, where you could put your comment, put it in the comment section, or you could retweet it with anecdotal uh, comment or anything, anecdotal video, whatever you would like to, of your own families and their part in the anti-imperialist struggle. So let us think on the questions that have been mentioned, that I've mentioned before, and also think that how we could uh, take local action into bringing the the entire how do I say, bring the community closer to each other through dialogues. And it is through these exchanges that we will be able to understand our own communities much better, so that we do not need institutions like SOAS. We do not need Oxbridges to tell us about ourselves. Let us take the responsibility to talk about ourselves to ourselves. Let us have a dialogue between you and us, between the community to community, instead of relying on a middleman, which is the academia, which is the Oxbridge institutions. So I'll just share the link, and please let me know what you think and what your views are. Look forward to it. Thank you.
We've been talking silently to ourselves here. We didn't realize we were muted on both. Thanks for that, and we'll be sharing those links here for people to be able to action on. The initial response was that if people had any questions either on the live stream or comments to add, please do raise any points. And then there was a question from the room, Sumana, for you.
Hi,
You have to cut your mask.
okay.
It's somewhere here.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi, yes,
Yeah.
I can. Please go.
Thank you very much for your talk and for everything that you just said. I have a question. Can you maybe shortly explain what you're currently working on and what is kind of the other processes that you are into?
Sure. So we are working as ex-RANA, which is the XR Affinity Network of Asia, which is an umbrella organization that works with many other grassroots organizations which are associated with environmental struggles across Asia. And I'm also part of other grassroots organizations called Vidya Safari Moksh, which is also which is an organization that works with sorry.
No, nothing.
Vidya Safari, the organization's name is Vidya Safari Muksh, which is an organization that works with, grassroots organizations and activists who are working on the ground in terms of, and not only just environmental struggles, but also other struggles which are, economic and social in nature. And in the same way, since we see it as a struggle which, environmental struggles are intertwined with political, social, and economic issues. Therefore, the struggles are sort of interconnected, and therefore, therefore the way that we function, or the way that we kind of link with other organizations, is all on these terms as well. So we do work with the, say, the Darjeeling tea workers associations. We do work with the the activists in Sundarbans. We also work with people with communities who have been, with Adivasis who have been who have been kind of deprived of their own land in central India, and also in Kashmir. So yes, so that's the kind of work that we do. Yes, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does for me.
Um,
Another one.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, hi.
Well, thanks very much for the talk. I was going to say, yeah, just as you kind of, you were kind of clearly mentioning that you think SOAS, well, and I agree as well, that SOAS doesn't really do a good job at connecting us to our communities and stuff like that. So how did you find your way into kind of the work that you're doing right now, if you don't think it was through SOAS? How did you get to this point?
Well, that's quite interesting. Yes, it is in this whole journey that after I went to SOAS, which I discovered for myself, my as I said, as I often say, that my decolonial journey started in the belly of the beast, which was in SOAS, and well, I wouldn't say that I wasn't aware at all about the decolonial journey, but I think from a very personal, level, it has started in SOAS, and it made me, I think it is because of the fact that when I saw the community, like the community that I come from, and the communities in Asia and in Africa have been kind of represented, that made me really, think back and see that where are we going? Where am I heading? And that has made me, kind of do the work that I am doing today. So yes, the black skin, white masks, which these institutions have produced and maintained, so that the status quo can be maintained. The status quo of coloniality can be maintained. So, so that's the reason why we need to take things in our hands and let us rewrite the history. Let us rewrite the knowledge about ourselves. Let us, rewrite who we are. And let us also, believe into who we are, rather than not believe in what the institutions tell us to believe in. So thank you for making that point again. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you then. I think there aren't more questions specifically here, but I have a question just for people from, especially those who are outside of SOAS and outside of, especially outside of this country, the United Kingdom. What are the concrete steps that, or points or things that you think that students can be doing literally now today, concretizing what we've been talking about how they can be serving communities, and how, what that process can look like during the time that they're here to serve ongoing struggles, the ongoing practical issues that communities are facing, especially seeing that there's a student rep in the room. For anthropology?
Yeah, for anthropology.
Yeah, student rep for anthropology in the room. But in terms of concretely, like what does this look like, and some practical suggestions, just so it lands that in our discussions after this call, we make those action points out of recommendations that you might have. Sumana, you might have some yourself, but anyone else? Yeah. Uncle Kofi.
Hello.
Yeah, hello.
Is a question being directed to me?
No, what, whoever. Yes.
Repeat the question, just for clarity.
The question was, what recommendations do members from communities, particularly outside of the UK, have for people here in terms of the practical steps of decolonisation, based on what we've been talking about? What recommendations can we then take into discussions to action? What students can be doing, what they can do. I was noting.
I'm not based outside the UK. I'm in the UK. So.
Yeah, the question was for anyone, but you raised your hand, so I accepted it.
Okay, all right. Well, from what I know, I think that first and foremost, people who are in the SOAS, whether students or teachers or workers, need to understand what this institution is meant for. As Sumana hinted at it, Kwame talked about it. The history is there. It was created, to impose British foreign dictatorship upon other communities, across the world, particularly in Asia and Africa. It was to train officials to be able to, as they said, actually, it is there, to impose British rule, right? Or British misrule. And that meant to reinforce conquest and domination. Now, that has not changed. We have today the announcement that British soldiers have been forced to leave Mali are being relocated to Ghana. And we know that the AFRICOM of the United States has a base already in Ghana at the airport. They occupy parts of 1/3 of the Ghana airport. And they are involved in exploring, mineral resources, So we can see very clearly the role that, SOAS for decades now has been playing in terms of providing, I would say, pseudo-intellectual, support, more in terms of what I'm trying to remember the name, Peter Fryer in his book, Staying Power, talks about scientific racist support for British, colonialism as part of Euro-American imperialism, in Africa, Asia, and that today, the cynical thing is that, a number of people are extracted from our communities and Eurocentrically programmed and through indoctrination to do that dirty work of Euro-American imperialism and British coloniality in our parts of the world. And that is the reason why many of you are in SOAS. You want to be part of that, right? Whether you are conscious of it or not, that is what has brought you there, right? Now, what our communities want is to be able to have their freedom from, foreign domination, and to be able to determine for themselves how to live their lives as they had been doing, from time immemorial before the European intervention, right? And so if you are in SOAS or any other institution, that is modeled on the European colonial type, right? If you are in any of these institutions, you have a duty in trying to find out what SOAS is meant for and what it is training you for. You have a duty to know this and then to make that decision for yourself, whether you are going to allow yourself to be programmed to continue crimes, against humanity, being perpetrated against peoples in Asia, Africa, or not. That's the first thing, because these communities want to be free. These communities want to go back to pursuing in self-determination their own ways of life, particularly at a time that this, way of life people are even realizing that it is taking the planet to the abyss of destruction. Okay, so that is first and foremost the decision that you have to make, and to make that decision, it is something that it's a matter of, first of all, your own intellect, and also it's a matter of conscience. It's also a matter of the class, and race interests that you want to pursue. So these are the challenges. The practical steps lie with, if you make a decision to be for what SOAS is meant to be, then you just take what SOAS teaches you and you go and become a desk killer amongst the many criminals that SOAS has produced and boast of as alumni. You just look at the Wikipedia entry on SOAS and you see those it proudly boasts as its alumni, right? Only few have gone against the grain. The likes of Walter Rodney, the likes of Paul Robeson, have gone against the grain, right? And but then if you opt to be, to challenge what SOAS is meant for, then you have examples of the likes of Paul Robeson, Walter Rodney, and to follow Ivan van Settima as far as the African ones are concerned, and the recent ones like I've forgotten this alumnus who is now imprisoned in Kashmir, right? So you have that choice. But to be able to do that consistently, you need first and foremost to reintegrate into the communities of resistance. And that is the challenge. I want to end on this note. The challenge is whether students who come into these places on the false pretext that they are being elevated above their people, they are being civilized to, in order to impose British and European interests on their people, whether you can, the pursuit of true knowledge leads you to that truth, that actually your people have, produced civilizations of their own, your people have their own wisdom systems, your people have lived on this planet, by themselves, and done, things for themselves, and therefore you want to return to be with them to continue that journey. That is what decolonization is all about. Decolonization is not about all the fanciful things that many people think it is. in schools, colleges, and universities. Decolonization is simply, making people who have been colonized and with foreign impositions, foreign domination imposed upon them, enabling them to be able to be free and to return to living their own lives, in equity with everybody else. And that is the challenge, that you have to face. PRALER offers the Planetary First Action and Educational Revolution that was launched in SOAS, offers an opportunity to make this journey of decolonization with communities. And I must stress that it is with communities. It's not being by yourselves on these campuses, talking to yourselves, attending lectures, and engaging in talking shops and thinking that is all about decolonization. Decolonization means life, or death for millions of, the majority of humanity. And it is whether you want to be part of their everyday resistance to get rid of foreign domination, for self-determination, for their own sovereignty, or you want to continue to be what SOAS, is supposed to be programming you for. The practical steps flow from that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. No more questions from the
Can I speak here?
question.
Yes, like comment.
Yeah, go on.
Should I speak here or should I speak in?
Is it for here?
Well, it's sort of in general, I don't really know. But
Can you hear
can
okay?
they hear us? Or will it just be us speaking to ourselves?
No, come.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah. No, you're not.
Oh, okay. No, basically, like, no, yeah, definitely. I think it's it's exactly the point. I think like one of the key things I was just thinking, like, actually, that we've got. Yesterday, I was talking to this brother. He's gonna try and join in a minute. He's from Peru, and he was saying one of the big problems that they're finding there in the university is like that all of them, well, a lot of them, they're from the Amazon areas in Peru. And they go into university and then they start talking about los pueblos, which means like the communities, no? And he says, we talk about los pueblos, but we don't. It's almost like we're not los pueblos, And I think it's the same here, like all those people, mentioned, like the Walter Rodneys, etc. Like they saw themselves as part of the people, like they saw themselves as not people here that were going to study what the people were doing, but people said, I am the people, and so I'm going to free my people, And I think it's the same, like goes for us, like do we, as we come into these spaces and talk about decolonization, do we see ourselves as part of the people, that we're talking about? Like, because if not, then it's not going anywhere, like it's not gonna be us like going to go save someone or say, yeah, we need to go liberate the lands of like these ones. Like, no, it's like it's gonna be us understanding that we are part of the people, and our fight for self-determination and sovereignty for our people is for our people, and with us in that. I think like one of my thoughts a bit was like, well, one, like that's exactly what the university has done in the sense of it's actually isolated us as peoples, and made us into like those that think that they can analyze their communities to best fit into their communities without actually just going and speaking to our people, like if you look at any revolutionary, the first thing they were doing was just speaking with people, and seeing them as people and knowing that they actually had the answers. I think like one of the, like Sumana, everything you said is really important. But I think also like we need to think about like, where are we going now? Because I think a lot of us, we know that this institution is built on skeletons. Like we know that it is a violation that is being perpetrated and that is being pushed out of this institution. But I guess the question is now for all of us, like, what then is our role, you know, to like, I guess it's a question about the practicalities, no? But like, actually, what does liberatory education mean? You know, what does it mean for us to come into spaces and be at service to our communities? Like, is it like what, you know, like what are those first steps? Because one, we can look into our own histories, we can look into our own communities, we can go into our own communities, we can see, you know, listen to that work. But until like, yeah, it's like there's big changes that need to be made, and I think there needs to be a collective discussion around, you know, what that change actually requires. Because if not, we just talk again. This becomes a talking exercise that it can't be. So I think it would be good to actually think now, like here, what is that is being done, I mean, I guess in different places, etc. Or examples, like I know Uncle, for example, like you've spoken about how like in UCL, I think it was, you know, the whole universities actually you know, mobilize the students union, I think, like to nominate, I think Nelson Mandela as their honorary president, for example, when he was in prison, and there are stuff like that, actions that students have made, bold actions that have been made. And I think it's important, like even the reason why we're doing it on this day, I don't remember exactly the name, but the name of the freedom fighter, Sumana, you were talking about, like for us to do those like that memoria histórica, like the historic memory of like what have been education institutions that work in service to communities, like what have they actually looked like, you know? So I don't know if people have examples of what they've actually looked like. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I so agree with you, sister. You know, I really agree with you. And these are the questions which even I was confronted with, you know, when I was in SOAS. And that is the reason why, you know, I took upon the journey that I am in right now. And, you know, the thing that you mentioned about being isolated with ourselves. And, you know, that is the sort of miseducation that I was pointing to. That is a sort of, you know, underestimation of our own selves, of our own identities, that we ourselves give power to such institutions to play with those kind of identities. You know, we have put, you know, SOAS and Oxbridge as pedestals of high learning. And once we kind of pass through these institutions, we think ourselves as high and mighty and, you know, have this rubber stamp on us of colonialism, right? And we say, okay, now we know the language of our masters, and you know, we can become the black skin white mask and become the new masters in our own communities, because you know, we can continue with the same practice of coloniality. And that is where, you know, that is the reason why we don't see many of Walter Rodneys, we don't see many of Paul Robsons. That is the reason why we see the erosion of values of our own communities and how we are the ones backstabbing our own selves. So I think you have correctly, you know, pinpointed the issue. And yeah, let us, you know, if we as ourselves are not conscious of what our own aspirations are, then, you know, I do not see, you know, where we as humanity will be headed to. So if we really want to, you know, have anything positive to contribute to our communities, it is in our own aspirations. And even if those aspirations are in sync with the aspirations of the communities that we live in. So those are, you know, questions that we need to confront ourselves with. So thank you very much for bringing this up. And yeah, thanks once again.
Please.
I think thank you for everything that's been said, Sarah. I think I just wanted to bring maybe an example that can help see through because I mean, and coming from the Abya context, educational institutions have played a really, really active part in the short-term and long-term processes of resistance and self-determination that are taking place in the continent right now, and how those educational institutions have actually been used and what it's actually taken to get there, right? For the examples of the Universidad Católica in Santiago, the Catholic University in Santiago de Chile, but also the examples of the University of El Valle, the Valley University, and in the Colombian Cauca, what is known as today, and how both of those institutions served the purpose of creating collective spaces for young people that were engaged in struggle during national strikes and social explosions, as they were called, in active resistance, in doing that work of actually stopping a society, to show both in the examples of Chile and Colombia, to really show the extent to which American, and by American, I mean it with the 3Ks, how American foreign policy and policy of neoliberalism pushed through continued militarization and destruction of our lands and our peoples, the extent to which that had destroyed Chilean and Colombian societies, values, et cetera, and those institutions, to return to that, young people were using them as basis to have assemblies, as basis to take care of the people that were being brutalized by police squads who are trained by the British police and armed with Spanish weapons from Spain as well. And they were using these educational spaces to take care of those people that were wounded, but importantly to also do collective work of, okay, how are we going to be doing this? And having a lot of input, specifically, especially in Cali, a lot of inputs from the Guardia Indígena, the indigenous guard of the Regional Indigenous Council of the Cauca. And how, so my question is like, what would it take? And obviously those are short-term things, but fundamentally they were rooted in really long-term student relationship with each other, and the fact that none of those students ever chose, they didn't have a different choice, because the conditions in which their education was taking place, it wasn't distinct from the conditions in which neoliberalism was creating the destruction of their own families and their own livelihoods as well. So I'm guessing, I'm wondering, like, what I don't see how SOAS can actually create that, or I don't necessarily see right now how that's where SOAS is headed. But what would need to happen for SOAS to head there? Or is the role of SOAS actually complementary and different? But fundamentally, there are institutions both in the urban centers that were meant to push neocolonialism in both of these territories, and there are also institutions more based in the rural areas that come from communities themselves, like the Autonomous Intercultural University from, again, the Regional Indigenous Council of the Cauca. But what would the role of SOAS be? Would it be the same as those urban institutions, or would it actually look quite different? And if it's different, how can the students of SOAS be enabled to actually hold the process that SOAS needs to go on to be aligned with the other students everywhere else in the world, if that makes sense?
It does make sense. Anyone can take it.
Can I try?
Yeah.
I believe that the challenge really is what students and teachers in SOAS want to do. I think that more than many other, institutions in Britain and even Europe, I think SOAS is one of those institutions that is really, really placed to do something different. if first and foremost, for me, it's a matter of understanding or understanding what are the obligations it has, the reparatory justice obligations it has towards the achievement of planetary affairs or its role in planetary affairs. Because if SOAS as an institution is recognized by students and teachers and the workers in SOAS as a crime scene committing, not just in the past, but in the present, odious colonial criminality against peoples, then, there is a duty to see how it can rectify that by engaging in educational repairs. I think one of the ways in which, students and teachers can do this is by committing themselves to community service and not only educating themselves, right, in terms of unlearning and learning what, will contribute to emancipation of peoples in the UK and beyond, but also organizing to do so. And I think that one of the practical ways in which PRALER should be encouraging students and teachers to understand is to organize themselves into cooperatives so that they can, they can do what people like, Walter Rodney and Paul Robeson did. People, if you read about Walter Rodney and Paul Robeson, as students, they were still activists involved in struggles for national and social emancipation of peoples oppressed by British imperialism, right? Right as here, when they were students under empire, they were fighting to set people free and, working at the same time, okay? So for me, for example, why is it that, students and teachers in SOAS cannot organize themselves into educational brigades, right? That's, for example, not only do community service, right, in this country, but during, for example, summer holidays, are able to go to places in Africa, in Asia, in Abiyala, and be part of community projects, agroecology, eco-pedagogy, culture, arts and crafts, so that they can learn and at the same, from those communities in resistance, and at the same time, also contribute, to a co-learning process, okay, where they also are able to help those communities to understand what are the realities of, life in these capitalist countries and what is their geopolitics of imperialism. And I think that those are the practical things they can do, so that if students start organizing themselves into these kinds of cooperative brigades that assist communities here, and it can be done. Law students offering legal services, those studying according to the disciplines. You can, as teachers, as advocates in various things that can be they can organize. That way, yes, the bonds between communities of resistance and students start being forged right now. And that will transform SOAS, because the knowledge that is brought into SOAS will be truly decolonial knowledge that compels SOAS to transform itself.
And maybe last one from Knuckles.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring a quick perspective up here from Edinburgh. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I just wanted to make a quick comment on the importance of Edinburgh University in acting as a sort of entry point for the English aristocracy into Scotland, and for the maintenance of that colonial relationship that has existed for centuries. Edinburgh University is very, very highly populated by middle-class students in and primarily from England, that swarm in like their thousands to Edinburgh, which is the capital of Scotland, and are educated in a way that is very, very unconducive to support for the struggle for national liberation that Scotland is currently in with the independence referendum. And this has like lots of different manifestations. I mean, partly English students that are brought through Edinburgh University and into Scotland actually have the capacity to vote in electoral politics, which has a huge sway on the sort of parliamentary outcomes within the city. But it's also just about the culture and stuff, and the way that places like the University of Edinburgh, which have really like taken Scottish traditions and folklore that have their origins in communities here, and basically presented them to the English aristocracy for very, very like blatant appropriation. I mean, things like Scottish dancing, reels, and wearing tartan and stuff. The majority of people that are involved in this university are in like sort of students who have their roots in the English aristocracy, who basically have maintained a lot of their power through the appropriation of land in Scotland, amongst other places. And yeah, so that's like the cultural element, but there's also an element to which the education itself is really, really, it's really problematic in terms of in that colonial relationship. I mean, I'm in my 4th year of a politics degree, and I've never had one single dialogue about the role of the university in maintaining this relationship. There's never been any sense of like self-reflection in that to start to help challenge the colonial relationship that exists. So there's that element, but the also element that I'm at the moment particularly working on is how the University of Edinburgh has the role it's had on the like local communities in and around Edinburgh. The sort of hordes of students, primarily English students, that it brings into the city have had an extremely detrimental impact on local communities. I mean, communities such as Leith, I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with Edinburgh, have been deeply gentrified and increasingly deeply gentrified, to a very large part by the student population that the English student population that the University of Edinburgh has brought into this country, and has used almost weaponized to consolidate their power over the city and the country as a whole. I mean, things like the University of Edinburgh is the biggest landlord in Edinburgh. A lot of that's to do with student accommodation and that sort of thing, and the effect that it's had for communities in terms of driving up house prices, but also splitting up communities. I was speaking to a member of Leith recently who was telling me that they lost their community hall because that place was being used for student accommodation, because the university had the financial power to buy it, and had lost like a seriously important community hub to this institution. And the effect that has, as I say, on mediating the struggle for national liberation here is really, really extreme, I think, and it's one which the university has almost no self-reflection on, to my knowledge. But yeah, I just wanted to bring that perspective in from up here.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Also, because that gives a sort of practical example, because in Edinburgh, they've at least done something of a commitment to reparatory justice. Like, they've set up something of a scheme to start working with local communities. And I think summarizing kind of this and the last two, it's more of a conversation to follow up afterwards, but actually, how is it that faculties have open conversations that are transparent, where like we compel them to come out and make these acknowledgements, and then we can start to negotiate or work through what their commitment will be, not to us here, but to the historic legacy communities, and build those exchange for like practical things that students can get excited about. Because I think that's something we could rally around quite easily and could be quite big in terms of setting an example for universities elsewhere, catalyzing change. And then this example of brigades and how the COSAGs are organized, like people should really see that that is what the logical conclusion of study action is. It's like, what take up these issues, knowing that there needs to be more that can be done with them. So thank you very much, Knuckles, and if anyone wants to like continue that dialogue in terms of that, the Edinburgh question, and if it might be interesting, then he's linked into PRALER stuff. So that brings us maybe not necessarily to an end, but I think people have got more things to share. Sumana has just shared the Facebook link in the chat for
Maybe copy it and we could put it in the podcast afterwards.
how is that? Just copy the text
Yeah, just copy the text.
and the link, right?
Yeah,
So we'll share that in the broadcast, in the PRALER broadcast, for the initial action point that was asked for, which is how do people, make a video, share your own examples back to our siblings and our family in India and in Asia about who are the heroes and sheroes that we're remembering from here, what we can do together, build these common threads and actually like solidify these connections. We will share from here and it's shared on the live stream. So thank you very much.
yeah, you did.
I think then this has been a pretty fruitful conversation. There's more for us to round up sort of here to actually think about, make some next steps. And I think so from what we decide and share in this room, we'll share that back with you all and share it back in, not only on PRALER, but back to those who have participated. I wanted to give thanks firstly for the time, to wish happy birthday to Jhalkaribai. Yeah, bigger energies. And then also to thanks those Robin on streaming, all that have joined to make it possible. Edinburgh team, Brother Kafwi, Sister Sumana.
Maybe we can take a happy birthday photo.
And I'm sure we can definitely take a happy birthday photo from yeah, actually think about where we go next.